Welcome to Striving for Best Practice Meals in Early Care Settings in Indian Country. I am Gary Piercy and will be your moderator. Some Zoom housekeeping tips. Please keep muted when not speaking. We welcome you to have your camera on, but it may affect your bandwidth, speed, and therefore your video or audio. Remember to use the CVent website chat and QA options if you have anything to comment or ask. And if you lose connection to the Zoom meeting, please feel free to try connecting again. Special reminder, there will be a session evaluation available and an overall evaluation for you to complete. We always want to provide the best trainings, topics, and experience. Now for our introduction. I've often heard the phrase, find something you are passionate about and you will not work a day in your life. I have been honored to work with our speakers over the last year and see this type of passion when it comes to creating awareness of enhancing nutrition and programs around healthy eating. Dr. Susan Sisson conducts her research in the Behavioral Nutrition and Physical Activity Laboratory in the Department of Nutritional Sciences at the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. She frequently collaborates with Native American communities, and children and disadvantaged populations are of special interest. Alexis Hamilton works at the Southern Plains Tribal Health Board as the public health specialist for the Wellness Around Traditional Community Health, the WATCH program. She graduated from the University of Central Oklahoma with a Bachelor of Science in Public Health and a minor in nutrition. I have the honor of working with Alexis and seeing the positive impact she provides our organization and the communities we serve. Alexa Jones is a graduate research assistant at the Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. She is working on a master's in nutritional sciences. She has helped develop menus and recipe books for the WATCH program. Thank you so much for being here. Turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm just so pleased to be here today with my collaborators and colleagues, and also want to acknowledge another collaborator who has been such an important part of this project and this work, Denny Medicine Bird. And he used to be at the Southern Plains Tribal Health Board, and he's moved on to his dream job. And I just wanted to acknowledge him as well in this work. Next slide, please. So we hope today that we'll spend some time talking and sharing some of our passion about healthy environments and good nutrition for young children, and that y'all will come away with some understanding about some of the things that are important to think about with building capacity within communities, to think about changing meals and menus for early care and education. That's ECE, early care and education programs, and enhancing the quality of the foods that's provided to those children in those programs. If y'all are coming from an early care and education background, you're probably familiar with the Child and Adult Care Food Program, but you might not be familiar with the best practices. And so we are going to share about those. And if you're not coming from an early care and education background, hopefully you'll have a whole understanding of the Child and Adult Care Food Program. And we're also going to share about the process and considerations for adapting Indigenous recipes for this particular environment. Next slide, please. I'd like to acknowledge funding for this project with the Centers for Disease Control, and then collaborative partnerships with numerous different tribes and nations over the years that we've worked on this. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over right now to my colleague, Alexis Hamilton, to talk a little bit about some of the community capacity and partnership building thought exercises and conversations that we engaged in to help best help communities.
Thank you, Susan. Hi, everybody. My name is Alexis Hamilton, and I am the Public Health Specialist for WATCH at the Southern Plains Tribal Health Board. And today I'll be talking to you about community capacity and partnership building. One of the original obstacles that WATCH had was having a successful menu implementation within the communities. So the solution that we created for this was to create a community capacity tool to help gauge the capacity for the menu implementation. So one of the first steps to building a community capacity tool is to simply just do some research about what the tool is, how to use the tool, and how it can be tailored to each program's needs. The main purpose of the community capacity tool is to gauge the capacity of a change that you're wanting to make within your community. So then whenever you move on to question development, it's important when formulating these questions to think about the why you're wanting to find capacity within your community. You can ask yourselves questions like, why are we wanting to change the menu? What kinds of challenges are we having with implementing new foods? Do we have all of the resources needed to implement new foods? Or what is making our menu not CACFP compliant? The surveys that we ended up creating were about 5 to 9 short and easy to answer questions. And each question was individually tailored to find a specific piece of data. The interview questions we created were a bit more self-reflective and gave more of an opportunity to dive deeper. So before we even introduced new foods and new menus, we had to ask ourselves the same questions and create a list of challenges that we were having within our community. We had to think about the different factors like what they wanted to change, their cultural implementation, their challenges with the menus, the feasibility for the change, their kitchen layout and resources, and their personnel in charge. You can also, if you're answering the questions previously, create your own kind of blueprint of challenges you might be having within your community to help gauge capacity. So now we'll go over these challenges and some example questions that you can ask yourselves to help you dive a little bit deeper and gauge your capacity. So if you know that you want a change, but you don't really know what you want to change, a good starting point would be to ask yourselves, what about your menu are you most proud of? Or what is something you would want to change regarding your menu or food preparation methods, if any? And this will help give you an idea of a starting point of if you're looking for a larger change or just a simple substitution. If these questions don't quite dive deep enough for you, you can ask, why are you most proud of that aspect? Or what other aspects of your menu are you proud of? And you can ask, why do I want to change this? And what are the things do I want to change and why? So another factor could be cultural implementation. There might not be enough culture in your menus and in the foods that you serve. And WATCH really focuses on health for children, but they also really want to honor the culture in each community and be able to bring that back as best as possible. So you can start by assessing your menus for cultural items by asking, are there any cultural foods that are currently being implemented? If so, what are they? If you're already implementing cultural foods, you could ask, how are we serving these foods? And how are there different recipes or other ways to prepare these items? If you're not serving any cultural foods or you want to serve more, you could ask yourselves, what kinds of cultural foods do you want to include and how will you prepare them? If you're really unsure about cultural foods, then this is a great opportunity to pair with a local organization for a cultural program that will help you to implement more culture in your centers. So another factor that might be affecting your menu changes are challenges that the kitchen staff might be having with the menus. So by asking them what challenges they're having will help open the door to what you can and cannot help them with. We found kind of listing it out in this format will help them see maybe what is causing a problem that they didn't see before. And it also helps them to think more about what is truly causing them challenges with menu change. So it is a good idea to get a little bit deeper with this by asking them, how are these challenges affecting you? What resources do you need to overcome these obstacles? what are your current menu preparation practices, and what is your current food and storage preparation setup. And these are key factors to think about because you want to make sure that you're not making any changes to the menu that's not feasible within your center. So for example, if you have limited pantry and freezer space, then it wouldn't be feasible to have a change that has a lot of frozen or canned items. Which brings us right into our next topic, the feasibility for change. So finding a good way to find out whether or not you're actually ready for a change is to gauge the feasibility of the changes you're wanting to make. So just simply asking how feasible would it be to implement the specified changes is a good start. Because if you're wanting a change but not ready for it, then it'll be a lot harder to have a successful implementation. So it's really important to take into consideration the time, staffing, and resources that you have before making any kind of changes to the menu. For example, we would have a try it day for the kids to be interactive with their foods and to try new ones. But if the center doesn't have the staff or the time, that it wouldn't not be feasible to include that specific day in the new menu. So you can dive a little bit deeper to find your feasibility by asking what barriers are you facing that might make your feasibility low, or what resources will you need to overcome these obstacles. So then the last factor we'll be talking about is the personnel in charge. When you're making any sort of a menu change, then it's important to make sure you're talking to all the right people and not overstepping or leaving anybody out. So having conversations with all the people involved, like the kitchen staff, directors, and anyone else who makes decisions regarding to food, allows for an easier implementation process and gives the centers an opportunity to all be on the same cycle menu and all using the same CSCFP compliant menu. So if you don't already know the answer to these questions, these are good questions to ask. Who oversees ordering food? Who creates the menu? Who's on the kitchen staff? Who chooses recipes and changes the menu? Are the menus the same across all sites? Does the menu have a cycle? If so, how long is it? So once you have the answers to your survey, then that will help facilitate the conversations for your interviews. And when doing these interviews, we really want to emphasize personalization and how to tailor the menu changes as to best meet their needs. And after finishing the interview, then you can take some time to analyze the answers and decide as a team the best way that you can help them. And for example, we look at where they shop at to see what's available to put items on their menu, because we don't want to put items on their menu that they don't have access to. So menu change requires a lot of maintenance and follow-up. So after you begin implementing the new changes, it's a good idea to get some feedback on how well the menu is working and how well the changes are being implemented. We used our menu feedback form to get information, and we used it about once a month after implementing the menus. And this helped with our Cheyenne and Arapaho communities because we used this tool to learn that it would be easier for them if we created a shopping list and recipe book for each month's menus, which we'll be talking about a little bit more later on. But keeping in contact with the communities and continuously asking them what's working and what they need help with will allow you to give the best support that you can make to their menu transition as smooth as possible. So if you would like any copies of our community capacity tools or the menu feedback form, please visit our website at spthb.org/watch, and we can get those for you. And now Dr. Susan Sisson of the OU Health Science Center, who has been a partner of Watch since the beginning, will go ahead and take over and explain more about menu development.
Thanks so much, Alexis. Just a little bit of engagement here. So by a show of hands or thumbs up or something, how many of y'all are coming from the early care and education environment? A program, a teacher, director? Okay, how many of you guys are coming from the public health sector? I see 1, 2. Okay. So Next slide, please, Alexis. Thanks so much. That is wonderful. That it seems that we do have some public health people and then some other folks here too. So I'm glad that you're here. And let me just tell you a little bit about the Child and Adult Care Food Program and the best practices. Since this might be totally new for most of you not coming from the early care and education world, the Child and Adult Care Food Program is a federally funded program that provides reimbursement for child care programs for providing nutritious foods. So this is a program that, that centers and family child care homes can participate to get reimbursement for some of the costs of the breakfast, lunch, snack, dinner that are served to children. There are meal pattern requirements that in order to get that reimbursement, they have to follow some specific requirements. We'll talk about those later. There's also some best practices, and best practices are really shooting for the optimal nutrition. And I'm going to talk about the best practices right now. Next slide, please, Alexis. So some of the best practice menu suggestions from the Child and Adult Care Food Program include including fruits and vegetables as snacks. So by taking that meal and putting a snack in is increasing fruits and vegetable intake across the whole day. Eliminating juice. While juice does count as a fruit, it doesn't contain the fiber or many of the vitamins and minerals that we have in a whole fruit. Including vegetable subgroups throughout the week. And this is just a picture here talking about some of the different vegetable subgroups. There's dark red and orange, and those are associated with vitamin A, potassium, fiber. Dark green vegetables are associated with A and C, calcium, folate, and iron. And then beans and peas are a great source of protein and also iron. Iron's really essential for children's brain development. So we really want to make sure that our young children are getting plenty of iron. Fiber is super important across all the vegetable subgroups. Starchy vegetables like corn and potatoes tend to have a bit more carbohydrates, but they do have minerals and vitamins and fiber in them. So if you think about the week, including different vegetables across the week and the subgroups across the week is one of the best practices. Serving meals family style, where plates are bowls, serving bowls are passed and children can scoop out, is another best practice recommendation. It really helps with children's autonomy and fine motor skills, the ability to choose what goes on their plate or how much of it. It also helps them listen to how hungry they might be, which is a really important concept in developing healthy eating patterns. Another best practice is two whole grains served in the day, only serving lean meats and nuts and legumes as opposed to higher fat meats, and then only serving unflavored milk. Next slide, please. And this slide just talks about some of the specific vegetables that might be within those subgroups. So not all green vegetables fit in the dark green category. A little confusing. It has been for me too. But we think about dark greens as our dark leafy greens. So broccoli, kale, spinach, mustard greens, those really dark, deep green vegetables. And they're associated, again, with different types of vitamins than our red and orange vegetables, which might include winter squashes, tomatoes, peppers, carrots, and pumpkin. All of our beans fit in the legumes, as well as lentils fit in the legumes category as well. And as I said, super good source of protein and fiber. So they're a wonderful meat alternate in thinking about how you put together a meal. You've got starchy vegetables, corn, green peas, lima beans, jicama, potatoes. They do carry vitamins and minerals with them, but just not quite to the degree as our dark green or our red and orange. And then we have lots of other vegetables. They're not void of nutrients. They just don't really fit into a particular category, where you've got asparagus, celery, cucumbers, and some others. Next slide, please. So I think it's really important to consider whether you're thinking about working with an early care and education program and adapting their menu, as Alexis gave us all those deep reflection questions to help people understand really where they want to improve and why they want to improve. Or you might be thinking about this for your own personal home. And that's fine too. I hope that you can take some tips away for that as well for your own family. But we think about baby steps. It is very difficult to make really big changes all at once. So baby steps is a really important consideration to move towards best practice. Perhaps you want to try doing a family style meal, for example, with a snack rather than lunch if you've never done it. And you just practice and the kids get better and then the staff get better as well. Thinking about staffing and as that relates to meal service and food preparation staffing, and as Alexis said about how food is stored, what the refrigerated and freezer space is, and then how food is procured. Next slide, please. And now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the important things to think about when you're thinking about a menu. And we're going to have some interactive bits in a moment, so feel free to please unmute yourself. If you type in the chat, we won't be able to see it. Gary will have to read it. So in order to keep things moving along, you probably want to speak up. And feel free at any point to type a chat question or even just unmute and interrupt and ask a question. Love to answer questions. So thinking about a menu, and we're going to talk about each of these in a bit more detail. You think about across a week or perhaps even across a month menu. For a personal home, you might not be thinking across a month, but childcare centers, they think across months and 6 weeks, and sometimes even longer than that. So we want to think about the types of food that are served, varying the preparation style of those foods. Think of variety of colors, variety of textures, and variety of shapes. Next slide, please. So thinking about color, the best way to do this, the way I love to do it, is taking out a month menu for these childcare programs and getting some colored pencils. Pencils are my favorite. Markers tend to be a little bit deep, but and then you just spend a few minutes coloring in on top of each of the words the color of that food. It really brings a visual and very quick assessment of what colors might be overly represented in your menu or what colors might need a little bit more enhancement. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's our interactive bit. So this is a week menu, breakfast, lunch, and snack of a real childcare program. I'd like for y'all to tell me some of the colors that you really see and perhaps maybe some colors that you don't see. Just take a couple minutes to look at this. Okay, next slide, please. So here we go. In case you guys were thinking, I'm not sure, here we go. Looking at this particular week menu, what colors do you see that are the most prevalent, or what colors might be missing? Anybody going to be brave to speak up?
White looks like the most color, or the one that has the most color.
For sure.
Green obviously is lacking.
That's right. Thanks, Gary. There is a lot of white and there is a lot of brown. There is not a ton of green. There's only one red. There's no blue and no purple. So this menu here is really sort of in the tan and white shades of cream. Is what it looks like. So when we think about all the different vitamins and minerals from different colors of vegetables and fruit, that's not fully happening here. Now, whole grains are going to be brown. And I just said we want to serve 2 of those a day. So you're going to have a good bit of grains that are brown. But we also want to think then about varying our fruits and vegetables. Next slide, please. So thinking about texture, this is something that's often overlooked, and we tend to get in a rut with how we prepare foods. Like we just always prepare a particular thing a particular way. But when we think across a menu, in addition to color, you want to think about texture, and you want to think about this at a given meal, more so than across a month, for example. You would want to think about different textures of soft, fluffy, crunchy, crispy, smooth, creamy. Some textures might be easier for kids to eat. Kids might prefer something. So something that you might find a lot is kids might like a crunchy carrot, but not a cooked carrot. They might prefer a cooked green bean rather than a fresh or frozen green bean. So it's playing with the way that foods are prepared. They might like fresh broccoli or steamed broccoli, or even prefer roasted broccoli. So there's a bunch of different ways that foods can be prepared, and just always being conscious not to prepare foods the same way, and across a meal, including a variety of textures in addition to colors. Next slide, please. Okay, so this will be a lot more fun if you guys would like to engage with this. I'm going to give you guys some, now we've talked a little bit about texture, color, preparation style. I'm going to give you guys some sample lunch pictures and would love to hear what you identify as being things that you like, or maybe that you don't like about these particular lunch pictures. Next slide, please. Feel free to unmute and jump in with what you like or you don't like about this, what you observe based on shape, color, texture.
Hi, this is Mary Frances. Noticing the plate is a little bit brown, brown tater tots, brown chicken nuggets, not much green.
For sure. Thank you so much, Mary Frances, for being brave and stepping in. Also, if we look at the tots and the nuggets, those are foods that have been pre-fried and have probably been baked up. So they have the same preparation style. Next slide, please. Okay, does somebody want to take a stab at this one? Something you like or you don't like?
Much more colorful.
It is more colorful. Okay, some things
fruit.
that, oh, I'm sorry. Somebody else, go ahead.
No fruit. No
Yeah,
fruit.
That's right. I think the fruit is the applesauce in the orangey applesauce. But yeah, they could absolutely have done a whole fruit. And everything on this plate is a little bit soft. You've got the applesauce, and then you've got the cooked peas and carrots and the cooked corn. Everything's sort of soft. So if you had a crispy something, then that would definitely add the variety here. Another thing I'd like to point out is they've got 3 vegetables, which is great. However, they're all very small in size, and they're all going to be soft. So we've got some similarities here. Having done, say, baby carrot sticks would have provided crunch, as well as a different shape and texture. So thank you so much for y'all that jumped in. Next slide, please. Anything that jumps out on this one?
It looks very colorful, but the texture is all, it seems like everything is kind of crunchy.
So yeah, some of the things might be crunchy. Bananas and plums, probably not so crunchy. This is certainly a lot more food than what a preschooler would be getting. It's really hard to find preschool lunch pictures available. So this is clearly a lot of food. It is super colorful. It looks like they have a whole grain sandwich, which is great. It looks like they've got a romaine type of lettuce on there, maybe not just iceberg where we're getting less nutrition with that. We've got different sizes of things. We've got our little tomatoes, crunchy radishes. The pear is probably going to be kind of soft. And then they've got a granola. So this is a pretty varied lunch. We can't see what's inside the sandwich. Next slide, please. This is our last one. So if you want a chance, now's your time.
This lunch looks really healthy for an adult. I don't know if a child would want all of those things in a salad, because my child would probably just eat the lettuce because they don't like tomatoes and peas and beans. And they'd probably just eat the fruit and the plain chicken and the milk. But I think this looks healthy for an adult. I'd eat it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Birdie. Well, I would say keep trying and keep offering those foods to young children. This is something we talk about with our teachers. Sometimes it takes dozens of times to try a food for a child to eat it. It still might not ever be their favorite, but we want to keep trying with that. A lot of folks, they're surprised when I say the literature says upwards of 15 times sometimes to expose. And my personal experience, it can be upwards of, 50 or more times to expose kids to something, to get them to try and then include it as part of their diet. So don't give up. So things about this plate is we've got some really soft peaches. We've got some beans. We've got crispy lettuce. The tomatoes are fresh, and the peas and the corn are both small, as well as the beans. And it looks like we've got a whole wheat roll. So this is definitely a great varied lunch for someone of any age. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Alexa to talk a little bit about menus.
Thank you, Dr. Sisson. Hello, everyone. I am Alexa. Like Gary said, I am the graduate research assistant that works under Dr. Sisson's Behavioral Nutrition and Physical Activity Lab. And I work on the menus, recipe books, and shopping lists that we develop for our communities. Next slide, please. So first we have a screenshot of 1 week of a menu that we have created. We create full month menus, so 4 full weeks. And as you can see here, we have some bold and italicized things across this week. The bold text indicates that this is a recipe from our recipe book, and the italicized text reflects foods of the month. There are typically 2 foods of the month each month, and it can be a category like tropical fruit or specific food like apples. So for this particular month, the foods of the month are apples and squash. So if you see recipes or meals with those things italicized, it means that they are in those meals. So a couple things we have implemented into this menu include our Try It Tuesdays and Traditional Thursdays. We wanted to emphasize the importance of trying new foods by setting aside one specific day a week to try, for children to try the foods of the month. So we coined the term Try It Tuesday, and every Tuesday we try to include both foods of the month. However, we don't just serve the foods of the month on Tuesday. We like to sprinkle them in throughout the rest of the week as well. Then with that being said, we also implemented more recently a Traditional Thursday. So we found that these communities weren't serving a lot of traditional foods, and we really wanted to increase the children's exposure to Indigenous foods, especially. So we tried to do this Traditional Thursday. We have included, as you can see on this Thursday, blue corn tortilla chips, because blue corn is historically significant in Indigenous populations. And then we also have an Aztec grain salad. And this contains quinoa, which is originated in South America among Inca populations. So we really try to find great Indigenous recipes, or even just kind of integrate little pieces like the blue corn tortilla chips made from blue cornmeal into Thursdays, just to have some exposure and provide an opportunity for education about Indigenous foods. Now, next, we also aim to include both old and new recipes. We are often adding new recipes to our master recipe book, but we make sure not to throw these in all at once, all in 1 month when we do get new ones. We like to include tried and true recipes that we receive great feedback on from the communities that both themselves and their children like. And as mentioned before, it's important to us when developing these menus that we address the color, variety, and overall appeal of the whole meal. For example, if we take a closer look at our Try It Tuesday, we see a variety of colors across the day. So for example, breakfast, we have pumpkin pancakes, and those will be orangey, some mixed berries, might be red, purple, blue. And then at lunch, we have quesadilla, pinto beans, which will be brown as well. But then we also have a nice orange sweet potato and some crisp red strawberries. Our snack here, while it doesn't differ a lot in color, it's a great example of differing textures. So you have the squishy, moist applesauce and the dry, crunchy seeds. Next slide, please. So this is another screenshot, but this is part of a grocery shopping list that we send to communities with the menus that we produce as well. So as you can see, this shopping list is organized by day of the week across the top, and then category of food item along the side. We really wanted to make this as easy as possible to use when you're going to the store, so you can find stuff in the same section of the store, like produce, for example. So we provide 4 of these shopping lists per month, 1 per week. And we chose to separate these lists into days because in our experience, some of our communities have preferred to initially integrate only a couple days of the week with recipes they really want to try, or maybe they only want to try one meal. Then they can kind of piecemeal their menu together in the beginning before they really dive headfirst into implementing a whole new menu. Next slide, please. Here we see the table of contents of one of the recipe books. So the 3 things we send out will be the menu, the recipe book, and then the adjacent grocery shopping list. So this recipe book will have 4 weeks, and each week will be organized by the order that the recipe occurs in as well. So these recipes, again, are the bolded text on our menus. And for example, we will take a look at the pumpkin patch pancakes recipe. Next slide, please. So this is what one of the pages of the recipes in the recipe book looks like. It is pretty plain, but our aim with these is to make them as simple as possible for people to understand and digest. So we include here the servings made by the recipe, the ingredients and quantities of each, the instructions, and the CACFP guidelines, which Dr. Sisson will talk about here in a moment. So I will pass it back to her. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Alexa talked about trying to incorporate more traditional and indigenous foods into these early care and education menus. And we started on this journey and figured there'd be a lot of these recipes out there accessible. And so unfortunately and surprisingly, there were not for this particular environment. So we started to do some of this on our own. There were a number of considerations that we had to make, and I'd like to just talk with you a little bit about that and then share with you a couple examples. Next slide, please. So you can't just take a traditional recipe and just serve it to the kids in the childcare program for a variety of reasons. There's a bunch of things we had to consider. Let me just share those with you. We wanted to make sure that the meals that were being served were Child and Adult Care Food Program compliant. The programs get reimbursement for that only if the meal meets compliance. So we didn't want to be adding recipes that would prohibit them from getting that reimbursement that they depend on. We also had to really think through time investment and cooking burden. A lot of childcare programs have very limited kitchen staffing and sometimes very tight spaces. So a lot of fresh chopping preparation can be done if it's planned and can occur at the same time something else might be needing a lot of demands. We had to think through sourcing of foods. Most early care programs source their foods from Walmart or Sam's or another large store like that, or a vendor. And so if there's heirloom varieties of foods that would be very difficult to access, then that's probably something that we prohibited for a program to do. Or if things were very expensive. Shoestring budgets and very, very, very low margins. So increasing food costs is not something that programs have ever said they want to do. They always want to keep things low. That doesn't mean that there might not be a time to splurge and purchase some, locally sourced foods from time to time on a particular topic or a particular thing. And if a child care program does have additional funding, that's certainly something that I would absolutely encourage. But on the general, keeping food costs as low as possible. We had to think about what's palatable for young children, and including, one of the ways we do that is thinking about including new and novel foods with foods that might already be a favorite or something that we know that kids really enjoy. So that's one of the tips that we talk about with childcare programs when they talk about kids being too picky or not wanting to try something. We try to blend the flavors with things that might be more familiar or a little bit more approachable to kids who might not be used to eating those kinds of foods. We had to think about scale. So some childcare programs are very small. Family childcare homes might serve just a couple few children, and some childcare centers might serve upwards of 150. So we had to think about the scalability of the recipe, and then the plate appeal things we already talked about, like shape, color, food prep style. Next slide, please. So this is the child and adult care food meal pattern for breakfast. And I've highlighted the 3 to 5 year old children, which is what we focus on. So breakfast, for them to get reimbursed, has to have some milk. It has to have half a cup of fruit or vegetable or both, and a ½ ounce grain equivalent. And so we had to make sure if we were preparing a breakfast meal that it included at least one full component of this. It was a grain-based thing, then it had to include the full amount of grain, or it could include both. And then lunch, you can see lunch includes 5 components: milk, meat or meat alternate, which could be a vegetarian, plant-based protein, vegetables, fruits, and grains. So a given food wouldn't necessarily include all of these, but it could include a couple, and we really wanted to be cognizant of this. Same consideration for snack. At snack, they just get to choose 2 of the 5, and so we wanted to be thoughtful of that. And so now I'd like to share with you a couple of examples that we've prepared. So I'm going to pop up the recipe in a minute or two. And so if you want to have your screenshot available, then you can certainly take a screenshot of the recipe. One of these recipes is Mother's Blue corn pancakes, and we made these in our test kitchen. And we did actually have some kids taste these recipes, and they did both get the stamp of approval. So some of the things that we put together when we prepare our recipes is a little bit of nutrition education and historical background of the foods that would be traditional or indigenous in the recipe. Next slide, please. We also include the ingredients, the directions and instructions on how to make it. We include the nutrition of that particular food. And what's really important for these early care programs is we talk about how it meets the CACFP guidelines. So our blue corn cakes provides that ½ ounce equivalent of grain and a ½ cup of fruit. So this would be a completely compliant and eligible breakfast. They don't have to add anything to it except for that cup of milk. So we really want to be considerate and thinking of the CACFP compliance because they think about it all the time. Next slide, please. And then we provide a scale recipe. So what the ingredients would be for various sizes of program. And these blue corn cakes are great. We also include any sort of tips. So they freeze really well. Some programs might do batch cooking where they batch a bunch of food and then they put it in the freezer. So they freeze and they thaw really well. Okay, next recipe. Next slide, please. Our Three Sisters quesadilla, super delicious. And then we talk a little bit about the nutrition of this and some of the historical significance. Next slide, please. Our ingredients followed with the directions, instructions, the nutrition, like the calories and the carbohydrates and fat. Sodium is certainly something that we're very cognizant of, so we include that as well. Fiber is something that we want to always increase, and so we include that. And then we talk about the CACFP guidelines. So this Three Sister quesadilla provides that 1/2 ounce equivalent of grain and 1.5 equivalent of meat alternate with the cheese and the beans inside, which is wonderful. So this meets 2 of the components for lunch, the grain and the meat alternate. And so that's, they would need to add a fruit and or vegetable and milk, and then this goes the rest of the way. We also made a note that this pairs really nicely with our summertime hominy saute, which is another recipe that would be the vegetable component. Next slide, please. We also prepared shopping lists. I've got one here. So if this was a recipe that they wanted, a program wanted to use, this is where you would be able to go find the ingredients for the recipe. Next slide, please. And then similar to the other recipe, we have our different quantities for different scale sizes. Next slide. So we're developing pilot recipes. We're seeking partnerships and going to be seeking funding on this to develop this out and make it into a cookbook that can be disseminated for these early care and education programs that may or may not be tribally affiliated. Certainly our Indigenous communities would be very interested, but lots of other childcare programs can include and start to talk with their children about traditional foods, Indigenous foods, and foods that may be native to their areas, in addition to those that are operated by tribes. Next slide, please. So with that, we'd like to conclude and see if there's any questions. Thank you all for your time, your attention today, your participation. And if there's any questions that we can answer for you, we would love to do so. Feel free to unmute and ask them or type them in chat, and then Gary can read them to us.
Absolutely. Feel free to type in the chat if you want. Something that I found so very interesting about the Watch program and the program, it's kind of, it's a change of mindset. So my question is, what types of challenges have y'all faced? And maybe an aha moment with your program and as it continues.
I'll take a first go, and then Alexis, if you have something to add, you certainly may. It is a change of a mindset. And when you think about changing these foods, it's really difficult to do. And it really is something that has to be done a tiny bit at a time. If you prepare meals for your own home, to say, okay, throw out everything you do and make all new food this whole month, that is a huge burden. And you're feeding a family not of 150 at a setting. So there's a lot of logistics that goes into changing and thinking about this. So I think it is a change of mindset in that sometimes we try to set goals that are really high and lofty, and we want to be doing best by our kids. We want to be doing, you know, all these new things, but to pace ourselves because we really want to be successful in the long term. So I think that that's a really important mindset. I think an aha moment was really in the lack of recipes, including Indigenous foods that are designed for early care and education programs. And that's actually led into this whole other project in trying to get these resources available to programs. And so I think that that's something that has been an aha moment. Our program that we were working with at the time, you know, we broached the question, would y'all like to include more traditional Indigenous foods? And they said, yeah, we'd love to. We just kind of don't know where to start for the ECE context. And so that's what broached those conversations. And it's been just a delight to start to think about that problem and how we can solve it together and create more resources. I know, Alexis, if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, I'll kind of add on to the other side of it, kind of the capacity building. But the first few months that we were trying to implement the menus, there were obviously different roadblocks we had to come over and all sorts of feedback we had to get. And like Dr. Sisson said, it's really hard to make just a whole menu change. Doing it step by step is really the ideal way to go. So whatever we can do to make it easiest for the community we're working with is kind of what needed to happen. So figuring out that we needed a shopping list and a recipe book and those things that we can do on our side to make it easier for them was kind of our aha moment, instead of trying to giving them our however many page big recipe book we have. And it's like, okay, go find all these new recipes, take the time to figure out exactly what you need from them. And so just us being able to offer them the resources of, here's your new recipe, but here are also these other items that will help you not have to think about all the other details that go into changing recipes. So yeah, we also have those available on our website as well.
Are there any other questions?
Or maybe a question for the audience: what's some of your favorite things that your kids are eating? Your kids'
well,
favorite?
I have to be truthful. With a 7-year-old, the plate that had the tater tots that were brown and the chicken nuggets that were brown, guilty.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what kinds of foods kids actually are eating and what you can get them to eat, especially if it doesn't look like something healthy. If you kind of hide the healthy food in there, then they're like, oh my God, it's so good.
I will say with this Three Sister quesadilla in particular, this recipe, some of our tasters were my own kids. I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, so well within this range. And we took the stuff and they tasted it. They tasted all of our recipes that we've been working on. And in fact, last night they just asked for us to make more blue corn scones. And so that's one of the other recipes. But with the Three Sisters quesadilla, the 5-year-old, she took her bite and she said thumbs down, but then she ate the whole rest of it. So she said, I don't really like this that much, but then she continued to keep eating it. And so I said, are you sure you don't like it? She's like, I've changed my mind. So, I think with getting kids to taste and try things, we really have to be very persistent and cheerful and encourage them trying the thing. And if they don't like it today, then we'll try again another day, and you might like it another day. And so I think it's just a matter of the persistence that's so important. But making sure that things are approachable, not too spicy, is certainly something that's important for young children. So we did have a couple test kitchen recipes that came home and needed glasses of milk and too much spice. So you got to be cognizant on that.
We just had a couple of comments in the chat. One, a question about posting the slides, and we'll try to make those available after this session. And then also just a comment from Taylor: growing up in a Native home, we had meat and bread all day, every day. So definitely change of a mindset.
I will say this, since this is being recorded, we will have the recording on our website as well for future reference.
And Alexis, would you give the domain of the website just one more time, just in case people forget?
Yeah, it's spthb.org/watch. Let me see if I can just pull it back up real quick.
All right, wonderful. Well, it looks like we are out of time. I just want to thank you three so very, very much. What an important topic and what a lifelong topic. So thank you. Thank you, attendees, for attending this session. We want to reiterate, we have an evaluation regarding this session, but also the training summit in general. So be looking out for those, and have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all for coming, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, guys.